Some people prefer to remain invisible in life until being invisible is no longer an option. Allie Johnson had planned to spend her first month at Westfield High quietly. Her mother was sick, and she couldn't handle another drama. But when Brad and his gang ripped her dress in the hallway, that girl from Allie's past, that champion fighter she had suppressed for years, finally broke free from her chains. The wide corridors of Westfield High were overflowing with the lunch break crowd. Loud conversations, slamming locker doors, and the sound of students rushing around created the cacophony of a typical high school day. Under the bright fluorescent lights, the social hierarchy was visibly on display. Popular kids, athletes, computer enthusiasts, musicians, each group occupying its own territory. Allie Johnson moved quietly along the wall, letting her wavy red hair fall across her face, eyes fixed on the floor, shoulders slightly hunched forward, a conscious effort not to attract attention. She had transferred to Westfield High a month ago, and so far her strategy of remaining invisible had worked. She had no friends but also no enemies, or so she thought. "Hey, Red!" a voice echoed down the hallway. Allie froze, her heart beginning to race. She recognized that voice. Brad Miller, captain of the school's football team, the boy at the top of the social hierarchy. For the past 2 weeks, Brad and his friends Kevin and Darren had been following her, with their eyes in the hallways, snickering. Allie had been wondering when exactly they would make their move. Apparently that day was today. "I'm talking to you, Red," Brad approached with Kevin and Darren grinning as they followed behind him. "New girl. What was your name again? Annie? Amy?" "Allie," she said softly, still not lifting her eyes from the floor. "Allie," Brad repeated as if her name was somehow amusing. "Why don't you ever talk to us, Allie? Too good for us?" "No," said Allie, clutching her bag tightly. "Just trying to keep to myself." Brad was an impressive figure at 6 feet 1 inch, with broad shoulders. His blonde hair was stylishly cut, and his blue eyes always shone with a confident gaze. The combination of his family's wealth and his athletic talent had given him an almost untouchable status at school. Kevin and Darren were his loyal lieutenants, one a muscular defense player, the other an athletic sprinter. Together, the three formed Westfield's feared trio. Students were beginning to notice them. A small crowd was forming, all wondering what Brad and his gang would do to the new girl. Everyone knew Brad's ritual of testing a new student. Some had experienced it firsthand. "You know," said Brad, raising his voice so the spectators around could hear, "I've been watching you. You always walk down this hallway, always alone. Maybe you should make some friends," Kevin added in a mocking tone. "Maybe we can help." Allie looked around. At the other end of the corridor, a teacher was visible, Ms. Chen, the science teacher. But she was too far away to notice Allie's situation. Brad signaled his friends to form a semicircle around Allie. With her back against the lockers, she was trapped. "You know what I was thinking?" said Brad, taking another step closer to Allie. "Your fashion sense is interesting." Allie's heart raced faster. Her brown eyes scanned across the hallway, looking for a teacher, for help, but no one was coming. She straightened her dress, feeling uncomfortable in the thickening atmosphere. "I think you're not dressed right for this school," Brad continued as his friends laughed. Before coming to Westfield, Allie's life had been filled with karate and quiet evenings with her mother. Mr. Johnson had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and since then it had been just the two of them, mother and daughter, facing life together. Allie had started karate training at 8, shortly after Mr. Johnson's death. Her mother had wanted her daughter to be able to defend herself and gain confidence, and Allie had excelled in the sport. By the time she was 14, she had 5 state championships and 3 national medals. Sensei Lee had said she was the kind of talent you see once in a generation. Then her mother was diagnosed with cancer, and everything changed. "Please," said Allie, her voice rising, "I need to go." She tried to pass between them, looking for an escape route, but Kevin blocked her path. "What's the rush, Red?" he said, lightly touching her shoulders. Allie stepped back from Kevin, but this brought her closer to Brad. Brad looked at his friends and smirked, then suddenly grabbed the sleeve of Allie's dress. "You could dress better than this," he said. "Maybe we should help you." "Let go of me," said Allie, her voice coming out surprisingly calm. But something was beginning to change in her eyes. Her brown eyes became sharper, more focused. Brad pulled on Allie's sleeve, and a ripping sound echoed through the corridor. The shoulder part of the dress opened, separating at the seam. The crowd held its breath, some shifting uncomfortably, but no one intervened. Brad, Kevin, and Darren started laughing. "Oops," said Brad mockingly. "Guess you definitely need a new outfit now." At that moment, something changed in Allie's mind. Memories she had suppressed for years came flooding back. Training in the dojo, tournaments, medals, trophies. Sensei Lee's calm voice echoed in her ears. A true warrior fights only when necessary. For 5 years, Allie Johnson had been one of the best in her age group at the National Karate Championship, until her mother got sick. After the cancer diagnosis, the training had ended. Treatment, moving, new school. Karate was no longer a priority. Allie had decided to leave that life behind, to be a normal, invisible high school student. But some things are instinctual. The body doesn't forget. "I think that's enough now," said Allie, her voice in a tone no one had heard before. Deeper, more controlled. Brad laughed. "Oh, Red can talk," even trying to be a little threatening. A student in the hallway whispered, "Let her go, Brad." "This is going too far." Brad turned around with an angry expression on his face. "Stay out of it, loser." "Not a threat," said Allie, fixing her eyes on Brad's. "A warning." Brad, Kevin, and Darren looked at each other and laughed, as if this was the joke of the day. "I'm telling you one last time," said Allie, her body now shifting slightly into a different stance. "Back off." "Or what?" Brad challenged, reaching for Allie's dress again. "Are you going to cry?" "Your mother—" Brad's last word was never completed. Allie's movement was so fast, so fluid, that most observers couldn't even see what happened. 5 years of training and muscle memory had kicked in. In an instant, Allie's hand appeared in the air, and a perfect karate chop landed on Brad's shoulder. The boy stumbled backward, crying out in pain. The move had been calculated so precisely that Brad wasn't seriously injured, but he was definitely feeling pain. Kevin and Darren froze in shock, but only for a moment. Then Kevin lunged forward, but Allie had already turned. With a series of fluid movements, she caught Kevin's arm and used her body weight to throw him to the ground. The boy fell flat on his back. The wind knocked out of him. Darren tried to run, but Allie had already assumed a defensive position. The expression in her eyes was clear. This fight wasn't over. Darren hesitated. Then Allie's foot lifted slightly off the ground, as if preparing for a kick. This was enough to spring Darren into action. He stumbled backward, tripped and fell, and began to scramble away. The corridor went completely silent. Brad was still trying to get up, holding his shoulder, while Kevin lay on the ground in shock. Allie took a deep breath, relaxing her body back into her normal posture. The crowd stared in disbelief at what they had witnessed. The quiet, shy new girl had taken down the 3 most intimidating boys in school within seconds. "What? What was that?" stammered one student. "Stay away from her," said another. "She must be some kind of ninja." "They deserved it," muttered a girl, putting her cell phone back in her pocket. "I recorded everything." At that moment, the crowd parted, and Ms. Torres, the English teacher, rushed forward. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking at the shocked faces and the boys on the floor. No one answered. Brad finally stood up, his face flushed, his eyes burning with anger. "She's crazy," he said, pointing at Allie. "She attacked us for no reason." "He's lying," said a calm voice from the crowd. A girl stepped forward, Zoe Parker from the journalism club. "I recorded everything on my phone." Brad and his friends harassed Allie. They ripped her dress. She was only defending herself. Ms. Torres's face showed shock and anger. "Miller, Reynolds, get up," she said to Kevin. "All of you are coming with me to the principal's office." "Right now." Brad began to protest, but Ms. Torres's stern look silenced him. Slowly, he began to follow the teacher, with Kevin following painfully behind. Ms. Torres turned to Allie. "You too, Johnson. The principal will want to talk to you about this as well." Allie nodded and picked up her bag. The crowd made way for her, some looking at her with fear, others with admiration. Allie held her head high, fixing her gaze on the corridor ahead as she walked. Zoe ran up to her side. "What were those moves? Do you do karate?" I used to, Allie said quietly. Not anymore. Why didn't you tell us? Asked Zoe, still in shock. Allie shrugged, holding her torn dress with her hand. No one asked. Principal Wilson's office was filled with tense silence. Brad and Kevin sat on one side, Allie on the other. After watching the video on Zoe's phone, the principal sighed deeply. Mr. Miller and Mr. Reynolds, he said, deep disappointment in his voice. This kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable at Westfield High. Harassing a student, ripping her clothes, this is a serious violation of our school policies. Brad quickly responded, but she attacked us. My shoulder still hurts. The video evidence is clear, the principal said sternly. You and Mr. Reynolds cornered Ms. Johnson, threatened her, and physically harassed her. Her response was a reaction for her own safety. Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes fixed on the floor. Ms. Johnson, I've done some research about you, said the principal, opening his file. Records from your previous school show that you won state karate championships for 5 years. Quite impressive. Allie shifted uncomfortably. I quit a year ago, she said quietly. When my mom got cancer. Understanding appeared in the principal's eyes. I see. And now, a new city, a new school. It must be a difficult transition. Brad interrupted. I don't care how difficult it was. She attacked us. Be quiet, Mr. Miller, the principal said sharply. Your behavior led to this situation. Both of you will receive a 3-day suspension. Additionally, you will pay for the cost of Miss Johnson's dress. And when you return, you will participate in an anti-bullying counseling program. I will also need to find Darren Collins. He will receive the same punishment. Brad began to protest, but fell silent under the principal's stern gaze. Your parents have already been called, the principal continued. They're on their way to pick you up. Now please leave me alone with Miss Johnson. Brad and Kevin reluctantly stood up and left the office, casting angry looks at Allie. After the door closed, the principal turned to Allie with a softer expression. Ms. Johnson, he said, first of all, I apologize for what you experienced. No student at Westfield deserves such treatment. Allie nodded, her eyes fixed on a spot on the desk. I don't blame you for showing your skills. The video clearly shows you were defending yourself. However, we need to be careful about using physical force in a school environment. It won't happen again, Allie said quickly. I promise. I'm not punishing you, Allie, said the principal, using her first name for the first time. I just want you to approach a teacher or staff member in the future, so we can handle the situation ourselves. I understand, said Allie. On the other hand, the principal continued with a slight smile, we've been trying to start a karate club in our sports department. Our coach recently moved away, and we haven't found anyone yet. Perhaps, would you be interested? Allie's eyes lit up for the first time. Really? Absolutely. With your experience, you could teach other students a lot, especially about self-defense. Today's events showed how valuable such skills can be. But I don't want to teach fighting, Allie said hesitantly. Karate is about discipline and respect. Exactly, said the principal, smiling. And that's a lesson our students need to learn, especially ones like Mr. Miller. The principal handed her a paper. Here are the forms if you and your mother are interested. Allie took the paper with a slight smile. When she arrived home, Allie entered quietly. Her mother was usually tired after a chemotherapy session, and Allie didn't want to disturb her. However, when she entered the living room, Ann Johnson was sitting in an armchair reading a book, with a cup of tea beside her. Hello, sweetheart, said Ann, smiling. How was school? Allie hesitated. Should she tell her mother everything? She didn't want to create more worry. Different, she said finally, dropping her bag on the floor. Principal Wilson wants me to start a karate club. Ann Johnson's eyebrows rose. Really? That's a wonderful idea. Are you sure? I mean, we gave it up and... No, sweetheart, said Ann, taking Allie's hand. You gave it up because you were worried about me. But I never wanted you to abandon your passion. Allie sat down next to her mother. I had to defend myself today, she said quietly. Some boys were harassing me. Concern appeared on Ann Johnson's face. Are you okay? Are you hurt? No, I'm fine, said Allie. They're not so good. Anne's eyes moved to her daughter's torn dress, then back to her face. She remained silent for a moment, then smiled slightly. I guess you remembered Sensei Lee's teachings. Allie nodded. Everything was instinctual. It just happened. Sensei Lee always said you were a natural talent, said Anne, stroking her daughter's hair. I've always supported you using this talent, but never to hurt others, only to protect yourself and others. I know, said Allie, and today was exactly that. Anne studied Allie's face. Something's changed, hasn't it? Something's different about you. Allie thought about it. Was she different? She certainly felt it, as if she had finally put down a heavy burden she had been carrying for months. I feel like myself, for the first time in a long time. That's good, said Anne. New beginnings can be hard, but sometimes they're exactly what we need. That night, as Allie lay in her bed, she received a message on her phone. It was from Zoe. Already 15 people signed up for the karate club. Crazy, right? See you at lunch tomorrow? Allie smiled and replied, see you there. Maybe Westfield High wouldn't be as bad as she initially thought. 3 days later, when Brad, Kevin, and Darren returned to school, they no longer walked the corridors with their former confidence. Students looked at them differently, no longer with fear or admiration, but with skepticism. At lunchtime, Brad entered the cafeteria and froze. Allie Johnson was sitting at a table with Zoe and her friends, surrounded by about a dozen students. Allie was drawing a series of movements on a paper napkin. They looked like basic karate stances. Then you shift your weight to this foot, she was saying, and everyone around her listened carefully. Self-defense isn't about showing power, it's about control. What will you do if someone harasses you again? Asked a boy. Allie looked up with a serious expression. The first rule of karate, avoid the fight if you can, but sometimes defending yourself is the only option. But that's not the same as attacking. As Brad passed by to sit at a nearby table, his eyes met Allie's. There was no fear in her gaze, no anger either. Just a quiet confidence, the look of someone who knew that no one would ever hurt her again. Brad quickly looked away and quietly moved to his table, Kevin and Darren following him. Something had permanently changed at Westfield High. The quiet, shy new girl was no longer invisible. Toward the end of lunch, something unexpected happened. Brad stood up with his tray and walked toward Allie's table. Conversation stopped. Everyone held their breath. Was there going to be a new confrontation? Allie, said Brad, his voice unusually soft. Allie looked up with an expressionless face. Brad. Brad hesitated as if the words refused to leave his mouth. I'm sorry. For that day. For ripping your dress and everything. Everyone in the cafeteria froze in shock. Brad Miller had never, for anything, to anyone, apologized. Allie studied Brad's face for a moment, trying to measure his sincerity. Thank you, she said simply. I accept. Brad nodded slightly. So, I heard about the club, the karate club. Maybe I could join too? Now a wave of shock spread throughout the entire cafeteria. Brad Miller wanted to join Allie Johnson's club? Allie hesitated for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. First lesson is Monday, after school in the gym. Everyone is welcome. If you're interested in discipline, not violence. Brad nodded. I understand. Thank you. When Brad returned to his table, his friends were looking at him in shock. You can't be serious, Kevin whispered. You're joining her club. Brad shrugged. I have to attend the anti-bullying counseling program anyway. And what was that move? I want to learn how she took me down like that. This is crazy, said Darren. Maybe, said Brad, looking across at Allie, but maybe it's time for a change. 2 weeks later, Allie Johnson was now one of the most recognized students at Westfield High. But she now seemed at peace with this. The Self-Defense Club had become one of the most popular clubs in school history, with 30 students, girls, boys, athletes, computer enthusiasts, from every group. One of her most surprising students was Brad Miller. From the first day, he had fully committed to the discipline and philosophy of karate. His natural athletic ability had served him well, and Allie was impressed by his learning speed. After one training session, Brad was sitting on the floor trying to regulate his breathing. Why? Allie suddenly asked, sitting next to him. Why what? Said Brad. Why did you join? Really, Brad thought about it while wiping his sweaty forehead. I guess I was ashamed of myself, he finally said, after what happened in the hallway. And in the anti-bullying counseling sessions, they made me think about some things. What kind of things? About how I behave. About why I behave that way. Brad took a deep breath. My father is quite a strict man. He always wants me to be strong, to win. Appearing weak is never an option. Allie nodded, beginning to understand. But what I've learned here, Brad continued, is what real strength is. Controlling yourself, showing respect to others, not having to prove yourself. Sensei Lee would always say that, said Allie, smiling. True victory is conquering yourself. Brad nodded. So, thank you, I guess, for teaching me this, and for accepting me into the club. Everyone deserves a second chance, said Allie. Even Brad Miller. They both laughed, perhaps their first real shared moment. Over the weekend, Allie and her mother returned from the hospital with important news. Anne's latest test showed that the cancer was in remission. The treatment was working. We should celebrate, said Zoe when she heard the news on the phone. A small party, just close friends. Allie smiled. Close friends. 2 months ago, she couldn't have imagined such a thing possible. On Sunday, a small group gathered at Allie's home. Zoe, Maya, Jade, and a few club members. They ate pizza together, watched a movie, and celebrated Ann Johnson's recovery news. You know, said Zoe at one point, all of this started because Brad and his gang ripped your dress. I almost want to thank them. Everyone laughed. Sometime, said Allie thoughtfully, life brings us challenges and pain. A torn dress, a new school, a sick parent. But sometimes these challenges come to show us who we really are. And who are you, Allie Johnson? Maya asked curiously. Allie thought about it, tucking her red hair behind her ear. I'm more than a champion. I'm not a victim. I'm myself, and I'm ready to show it now. Late that night, Allie was reading a book in her bed when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello, she said hesitantly. Allie, said a deep voice. This is Sensei Lee. Allie's heart jumped. Her former karate teacher was calling her for the first time since she had quit. Sensei? Hello. How are you, young warrior? Asked Sensei Lee with genuine warmth in his voice. I'm good. Actually, I'm really good, said Allie, smiling. That's what I wanted to hear. I got word about your club at school. The principal called me to give a seminar next month. I'm proud, Allie. Allie's eyes moistened. Thank you, Sensei. I missed you. I missed you too. A student like you comes to a teacher once in a lifetime. When the conversation ended, Allie put down her phone and looked out the window. In the distance, stars were twinkling. Life was strange. It could turn in ways you never expected. A month ago, her mother was sick. She was alone, and her life was uncertain. Now her mother was recovering, she had friends, and she had even started a club. And it all began with a dress ripped in a hallway. Sometimes life's darkest moments bring out the brightest light. A month later, a special event was held in Westfield High's gymnasium. The self-defense club was giving a demonstration open to the rest of the school and parents. In front of the crowd filling the gym, Allie Johnson and the club members showcased the moves and techniques they had learned. For the finale, Allie and Brad performed a simulated fight demonstration with perfectly synchronized movements. Brad's athletic ability and Allie's experience created a performance that mesmerized the audience. When the demonstration ended, Principal Wilson stepped forward amid enthusiastic applause. Today, we witnessed a display not just of physical skills, but also of discipline, respect, and perseverance. Thank you to Allie Johnson and all the club members. As the crowd stood applauding, Allie saw the proud expression on Anne's face. Beside her, Sensei Lee watched with an approving nod, tears in his eyes. Allie turned to look at the front row and smiled slightly. Here she was, despite all the challenges life had thrown at her. A red-haired, confident girl who no longer wanted to be invisible. Bullies may have ripped her dress in the hallway, but they had also reminded her of who she was. Sometimes life attacks us, and sometimes in the most unexpected moments, we learn to defend ourselves. Allie Johnson had now become one of the most recognized students at Westfield High, but this was her choice. She was no longer hiding, no longer ashamed of her potential. She was shining as herself, and this light was illuminating those around her as well. Sometimes life rips your dress, and sometimes that tear is exactly what you need for the champion inside you to emerge. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications for more inspiring stories. Where are you watching from? Share in the comments. See you in our next story.